Despite being complex and abstract tools for communication, people like to represent languages in simple ways. The most common method of this for casual use is by using flags. The idea is simple. Use the flag of Slovenia for Slovenian, the flag of Slovakia for Slovak, the flag of Greenland for Greenlandic, and so on. But there is a lot more nuance to this, as well as plenty of situations where country flags are less than ideal for representing certain languages. Using country flags works best for languages closely associated with nation-states, where the concept of one country, one people, and one language mostly holds true. It is true that ethnicity and language tend to correlate in what is called an ethno-linguistic group, but this in turn never cleanly aligns with the borders of countries. With Hungarian, for example, it's primarily spoken in Hungary by ethnic Hungarians, but it's also spoken by minorities in Romania, Slovakia, Serbia, Austria, and other neighboring countries, as well as elsewhere by immigrants living in places like the US and Germany. And within Hungary, there are also small minorities that speak languages such as Romanian or Ukrainian, on top of English and to a lesser extent German being commonly learned in schools there. Yet despite these circumstances, depicting the Hungarian language with the flag of Hungary is among the best examples of language flags working well as a means of representation. Most other languages are comparatively not as smooth. Certain Western European languages, namely English, Spanish, and Portuguese, are often represented either with the flags of the UK, Spain, and Portugal, or with the flags of their formerly subjugated colonies, which have since become the countries home to the most speakers of their languages, namely the US, Mexico, and Brazil. With English and Spanish, I tend to see the British and Spanish flags used more often, but since there are far more Portuguese speakers living in Brazil than in Portugal, I've seen the flag of Brazil used to represent Portuguese more often than the US and Mexican flags are for their respective languages. Combination flags of the two also exist, which are perhaps a good compromise. People and platforms will often mix and match the existing options with these three languages. Duolingo, for example, uses the flags of the United States and Brazil, but uses the flag of Spain for Spanish instead, while Link uses the British and Spanish flags, but has a combo flag of Portugal and Brazil for Portuguese. I've been ignoring a fairly large elephant during this section, in that Spanish is natively spoken in a lot more places than just Mexico and Spain. The same is true with English and Portuguese as well, but their native speakers are more concentrated in the US and Brazil than native Spanish speakers are in Mexico, to where I sometimes see the flags of Venezuela or Argentina used to depict Latin American Spanish instead of the Mexican flag. And theoretically, any of the countries where native Spanish speakers are the majority could be used to represent the language. A similar case applies to Arabic, where the flags of any country where Arabic is spoken by most of the population could potentially be used to represent it. The most logical choice, though, is to use the Arab League flag, representing the majority of the territories where Arabic in all its forms is spoken. Unfortunately, the flag of the Arab League, alongside thousands of other flags which don't belong to a country or dependency, aren't widely available as official emojis. Meaning if you want to use them in text, on phones, or on language role selection messages for Discord, people typically use one of the available country flags. Saudi Arabia seems to be the default option since it literally has the word Arabia in its name, but sometimes you see the Egyptian flag used because it's the country with the most Arabic speakers, and the flag of Palestine can also be used if you're really cool. Of course, there isn't one singular form of Arabic, being split between MSA and all the regional dialects. And since most dialects are associated with a whole country, such as Egyptian Arabic, Libyan Arabic, Tunisian Arabic, Algerian Arabic, and Moroccan Arabic, it's reasonable to have their corresponding flags represent that particular dialect. And the same applies to highlighting dialectal variation between any language spoken differently across several countries, such as contrasting Mexican Spanish with Castilian Spanish and General American English with RP. Oftentimes, the flag of a certain region within a country is used to represent a minority language spoken there, such as the flag of Brittany within France for Breton, and the flag of Sardinia in Italy for the Sardinian language. There are also plenty of ethnic groups without countries or subdivisions to call their own, but still have their own ethnicity flags, such as with the Berbers and Maori. Those can very much represent the languages they speak as well, although sometimes these flags can suffer from a lack of recognizability. This flag, for example, I'm willing to bet most of you don't know this is the flag of the Erzya people, who speak the Uralic language Erzya and primarily live in the Republic of Mordovia and surrounding areas within Russia. An interesting example of a sort of ethnic flag is the Wipala, which represents various indigenous groups living by the Andes Mountains in South America, such as the Quechua and Aymara. But since it's used by multiple ethnic groups, its usage as a language flag is slightly dubious, since it could refer to Quechua or Aymara, and there'd be no way to tell without context. It's fine when multiple flags could refer to the same language, but it's less fine when multiple languages could be indicated by the same flag. There are, however, plenty of linguistically diverse countries, such as the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Papua New Guinea, where their flags could potentially refer to any one of the hundreds of languages spoken within their borders. This could be acceptable if the language is being explicitly specified, with the flags used primarily as a visual flair and to indicate where they're spoken to an audience that may be unaware of their existence, as is done in Artifactian's videos. Then there is Tatueba, which takes a more interesting approach to this. For languages hard to unambiguously represent with a certain flag, they typically use the flag of the country or region that they're primarily spoken in, and then stick a vertical text of the language's 3-letter ISO code to the right. Other times, they ditch the first part and have their flags be their language code on a white background. It's in cases like these where I'd prefer if no flags were used to portray the language at all. Flags are also inherently at least a little political, and can be easily made very political. There's the example of the Ostelada for the Catalan language, which implies support for the Catalonian independence movement, as opposed to using the not as aesthetically pleasing Senyera. But even for already independent countries, the usage of their flags for the languages they're associated with normalizes the continued existence of that country in its current state. And given the evil acts that some governments commit, it can feel wrong to go on casually using their administration's flag. I won't dare share any specific examples, but depending on your views, a certain country may come to mind for you. In these cases, some people take to using the flags of other countries where that language is spoken. This is related to the concept of joke language flags, where instead of using more sensible and recognizable country flags, the flag of a much smaller and less talked about country where the language is also official and spoken in is used instead. Examples include San Marino for Italian, Liberia for English, Equatorial Guinea for Spanish, the Central African Republic for French, and plenty of others. Though there is very much a difference between formerly colonized countries where the majority of the population speaks the colonizer language natively, primarily in the Americas, and countries where while the colonizer language is often the only one official, it's only spoken natively by a small percentage of the population, primarily in Africa. Rather than save it for the end of the video, I think now is a good time to bring up the main alternative to representing languages with flags, which is to use their names instead. This is much more straightforward than the mess of language flags, as well as usually unambiguous with regards to which language is being talked about. However, there are still dilemmas that come with choosing which name to depict a language with. Most importantly, whether to represent it with the name that a language calls itself written in its native writing system, or to call the language by its name in the language being used to discuss it, which in this case would be its English name. Using the English name usually has more recognizability among English audiences, since not everyone knows the name that every language refers to itself with. But on the flip side, the language's name for itself would remain consistent no matter what language is being used to talk about it. Vietnamese is the term used in English, Vietnamita is used in Spanish, but both of them could theoretically use Tiếng Việt to represent the language with. Language selection interfaces most often go this route, since if you don't recognize the name of a certain language, you probably shouldn't be selecting it. However, this can be undermined in cases where a language has several names, such as the primary language of Slovenia, which can be called either Slovene or Slovenian in English, as well as either
Slovenština
or
slovenski jezik
within the language. Other times, there are two completely unrelated languages with the same name, such as the Atong language of India and the Atong language of Cameroon. There are also a few languages which have just one spoken name, but can change in text form depending on which writing system is used, such as with Punjabi, differing between Gurmukhi and Shahmukhi. In other cases, a language's writing system can change, and the written name alongside it, as is happening with Kazakh. Or sometimes even a simple spelling reform could change the language's name. Of course, official flags can change as well, and language flags alongside them. It was very much reasonable to use the flag of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to represent the Dari language, since it's primarily spoken in Afghanistan, but after a certain group, which I'm not sure whether or not YouTube will demonetize me for mentioning by name, took over, they changed the country's flag to this abominable crime against vexillology, which I suppose should be used for Dari now, although the flag's emoji has been unchanged as of 2025. And if referring to the Libyan dialect of Arabic, There was a flag change in 2011, which is dated pretty much anything from before then, using the pure green flag to represent Libyan Arabic. There's also nothing stopping people from using both flags and the name of the language in conjunction, and this works well to both remove ambiguity and maximize recognizability for which language is being talked about. One type of language which lends itself especially well to flags are creoles, since they're more often than not associated with one single country or region, exemplified by the Haitian flag for Haitian Creole, the flag of Jamaica for Jamaican Patois, and the flag of Nigeria for Nigerian Pidgin. Conlangs also lend themselves particularly well to language flags, since more often than not, those flags are created specifically to represent the language and the community that speaks it. Examples of this are the flags of Esperanto and Interslavic. Other conlangs, however, opt for symbols instead of proper flags, such as Lojban and Tokipona. There of course have been proposed flags for these languages, most of which incorporate said symbols, but they haven't been adopted by their communities at large. It's clear that flags are not a perfect way to represent languages, but people are going to keep using them, and that should be accepted. I could keep rambling on about specific interesting examples, but I had a mental breakdown in the middle of writing this, so I'm just gonna end this video here. Special thanks to my good friend Poplio for drawing these emotes, and my other friend Anonymously Annoying for drawing the original sketch. Thank you to my Patreon supporters Dope Kid, Rosetta Stevens, Essie von Nostrand, Sunder, Erica Sim, Adam Zrinek, Gekivion, Luke Jensen, Andrew Brown, Alexis Asgeris, Carol Soul, and Peter F. Abrupt ending to the video.